So, welcome back. My name's Damien, and I'm doing this month's Monday nights. And so I think after last week, I like the feel of slogans when I do my Monday nights. So I've sort of come to understand that what I'm talking about we can call closing the gap. So this is closing the gap. Closing the gap between our aspirational belief system or our aspirational ethics, natural human ethics, secular ethics, religious ethics. Even if we create our own little scheme, there's an aspirational ethic in that. So there's that aspirational ethic, and then there's the reality. There's the reality of my behaviour, and there's generally, for myself, and I think for most people, unfortunately, there's a bit of a gap between this, aspiration for kindness, aspiration for peaceful mind, peaceful society, expressing love and compassion, and, an aspiration for wisdom or an aspiration for harmony, all these sort of aspirational things that we may very happily subscribe to. But then in our own life, we can see that we may not live up to this aspirational behaviour very well at all. So there's a gap between, and as I was saying, the old Tibetan Buddhist saying is that when there's a gap between your faith or your aspirational system and your own behaviour, then at the end of this life that gap can be big enough that you just scoot on through the gap. And so your so-called ethics or your so-called religion, your faith, your belief system, at the end of this life may be of no benefit to you because your own life, your own experience and practice and the way you've lived your life is too distant. And so it leaves this gap that enables us to fall into some maybe unpleasant future. So, but the aspirational system is really good because it can give us a model. It can give us a model of what to aspire to. I mean, that's its very purpose. And so I've been talking about several steps here. Have faith in your aspirational model. Whatever that is, whether it's a religious system or a natural ethics system, a secular ethics system, whatever it is, have some real faith in that. But then your own behaviour or your own life, to examine that and apply some effort, some goading, sort of give yourself a little bit, this approach appeals to me because when I met Buddhism, this was what appealed to me, right? The direct talking, the direct thing of look at yourself and identify the reality of what you think and behave, the reality of your own thinking and behaviour. So no sort of, you're a nice person, no Lama has ever said that to me. So whatever my personality is such that, there's many stories I can tell of Lamas who completely ignored me, never said anything, just sort of take the opportunity if it arises to criticise, because I think I need that tougher approach. So other people need a soft, gentle approach, right? So we're all different in that regard. But it's this sort of particular approach of examining my own behaviour and being self-critical, self-analysis and self-critical. For me, I have found that approach to be beneficial. Okay, so I'm not saying that is necessary what everybody here may require, but for me, that approach has been beneficial. So a little bit of what I've been doing this month is going down that path of looking at yourself and saying there is a gap between the fine words that I pronounce and the fine views that I write on Facebook. Yes, I'm from Missouri and I believe in world peace. That sort of fine view that we might promote. And then the reality of my own thinking, my own prejudices and annoyances and resentments and jealousies and pride and arrogance that I can see in my own mind. So this is the sort of analysis that I'm promoting the idea of, is the real idea of looking at your thinking and your behaviour in a very naked, unprejudiced manner. Really accepting your behaviour as it is, without trying to sugarcoat yourself and say, but in reality I'm a really good person. Not to go down that, not to be dishonest with yourself. So, look, that approach isn't for everybody, so you're most welcome to not sort of particularly absorb that. But for me, I think this has been beneficial to look at myself in that manner. And so this month I'm sort of talking along those lines a little bit. But to understand that approach, that the more, a little bit more naked, truthful approach to yourself and your own behaviour, I think is really beneficial. So, we are all the same. We are all the same in wanting happiness and wanting to be free from suffering. Right. So this is a truth about every living creature. And I think part of that truth as well is to accept that every living creature actually has the right to happiness and to be free from suffering. So that is something that we can also contemplate and view for others as well as for myself. That I can sort of, if I start to look at my life, I can see that every action in my life has been geared around wanting to be happy and wanting to be free from suffering. And so we can just start from that personal experience. So just thinking about yourself, you think, I want to be happy, I want to be free from suffering. And so there's a process that then occurs. So if we imagine that the world, let's say we just got dropped into the world and there was no explanation of the world whatsoever, no philosophy, no religion, no wisdom that we had or anything. We just get dropped into the world in a completely blank canvas. So what would happen then is, we would have the thought, I, my experience, my mind, my body, I. Oh, I like that. That, you see something, your eyes see something, and in that moment of contact, there's some sort of pleasurable experience, and you think, oh, I like that. That's attractive. In fact, that's really attractive. I want that because I will be happy. I'm happy now in seeing it, and I'll be even happier if I own, control, possess, and entrap and, hold on to that thing that I like. Okay? And then similarly, there's this other object here. I don't like that. It's really unattractive. In fact, it's aggravating me. It's annoying me. I'm starting to get angry. I want to push it away. I don't want it to be in my sphere. So we can see that yes, I have an innate wish to be happy, but what happens is that my sensory engagements with objects, I start to believe that my happiness is directly caused by possessing what I like and abandoning what I don't like. So that, it's quite reasonable. I've been saying this, that it seems to us actually quite reasonable that we should be entirely sensory driven, that our senses, it makes sense to us that my happiness comes from taste, touch, smell, sight, sound. It sort of makes sense because my experience is that I hear something that I like and then I want to hear more of it. And I think that I'm feeling happy because I'm hearing this beautiful sound. I see a beautiful object, I touch a beautiful object, I have physical contact that feels nice to me. And so I think that, well, obviously, the more that I have this sense of touch and smell and taste that I like, the more happy I will be. So it sort of makes sense to us in a way that this physical world, the physicality, the sensuality of our contact with this world is the source of happiness. It sort of seems like that's reasonable because it's close to what we actually experience. But the reality then is that we find that I want this, I like this, and then somebody else comes along, or I really want you, relationship, I must have you. Well, I'm not interested. The response comes, well, I'm not interested. Well, then anger, resentment, bitterness can arise. And so we can see then that in a way, the sensory clutching that we have actually then triggers, if it doesn't go our way, it then triggers great dissatisfaction and mental suffering and mental unhappiness. And similarly, even something that we really dislike and it persists in hanging around, or it's our environment is that what we don't like, and then we have no escape and we just feel tormented by what we don't like from a sensory point of view. I don't like the sound of your voice. I don't like the sight of you. I don't like anything about you. Why are you hanging around? I am so tormented. So we have this process, completely driven by our perception of the sensory as the truth. So we can see that if you look at your life, I think this is absolutely true, that we have these experiences of dissatisfaction because we are so reliant on the sensory world. And the point of this whole discussion is that you can see that if we are 100% engaging in the sensory world like this, then all that we will experience will be dissatisfaction, because it is not possible for the sensory world to completely go our way, because in truth we have no real control over it. So the end result then is that we have in this society and many societies, we have people who have every imaginable wealth. They have every imaginable praise and fame, glory, high status, even people worshipping them, following them around, trying to serve them, trying to do everything to keep them happy, and they're not happy. It's a common thing that if a person is 100% reliant on this sort of sensory and then trying to protect it, that it's very hard to find an example of somebody who is so totally engaged in the sensory or the sensual who actually ends up being satisfied. So, you know, and we all, to varying degrees, we suffer from this problem of thinking that the actual cause of happiness is through the physical world and the acquisition of the pleasant sensual objects and the denial or the abandoning of the unpleasant sensual objects. You know, the changing the channel on the TV, you know, it's a battle. We are battling to find happiness, and so we go click, 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 trying to find happiness. So the spiritual practitioner, a person who relies on, you know, a spiritual practice. So a spiritual practitioner is somebody who similarly adopts and similarly abandons. So the sensual world, we are adopting and we are abandoning what we think are the causes of happiness and the causes of suffering from a sensual or a sensory point of view. The spiritual practitioner also adopts and abandons in relation to their mental state, an internal. So they adopt a practice of an internal adoption and abandoning of mental states. Because I've come to see that the issue with the world is that although the material, you know, the beautiful object, that there is a moment of contact when there is some sensory pleasure, but that pleasure is almost innately dissatisfying. And so the process of working internally with your state of mind is a much more fruitful process. It is one that can deliver a real result in happiness and in freedom from suffering. And so the spiritual practitioner is a person who adopts what is the cause of happiness and abandons what is the cause of suffering internally. You know, relying on an internal process, not an external process. Okay, so I think this is a really important point to understand, that in a way and it's, as I've said the last few weeks, it's almost like a forgivable mistake that we have made to think that the external world is the real cause of happiness and the real cause of suffering. Because our sensory, the domination of our experience from the senses is so prominent, you know, that domination is so prominent that I think we can be forgiven for being mistaken on this front. But the reality is that the internal world is a lot more fruitful area to be working at in terms of what to adopt and what to abandon. So, you know, sometimes in Buddhism there's people do what they call a refuge ceremony, where you can formally sort of declare that you're a Buddhist. And in that ceremony there's a part where it says, you know, you are now an insider, right? But it does not mean you're now part of a secret club or a secret society and you're on the inside of that secret society. It doesn't mean that. It means that now you have committed yourself to be a person who works on the inside. You have become a person who works internally with what to adopt and what to abandon. And so you're trying to make a transition from the external sensory, you know, thinking that happiness and suffering are just driven by our worldly interactions, our contacts, and you're then trying to work on an internal level as to what what to adopt and what to abandon. And so you have become an insider, a person who works on the inside, not a person who works on the outside. And I think it's really important to understand that. So whether we're Buddhist or not Buddhist or whatever, this applies to anybody who can see this sort of error or deception in the physical world. So I want to be happy, I want to be free from suffering. Whose responsibility is that? Is there somebody here who's going to do that for me? Anybody? Anybody going to do that for me? You know, make me happy, make me free from suffering? No hands. Good. So it must be my responsibility. It's my responsibility. So this is the other aspect to really accept, is that it's my responsibility. My happiness, my responsibility. My disturbed mind, my responsibility. Yeah, so closing the gap. And as I've been talking about, is recognising within yourself. So like the example that we used last week, the idea that, you know, anger, jealousy, competitiveness, arrogance, pride, you know, inflated pride, superiority. We think these are all serving my happiness. That these, you know, we think that, you know, having pride, you know, that makes me happy, you know, that, and being arrogant and superior towards others. Well, you know, that's because I'm better than them. So I'm happy because I'm better. You know, competitiveness. I need to put this person down. I need to sort of be superior to them. And this person who is, you know, much more qualified than me, well, I'm equal to them. You know, and so, you know, this sort of competitiveness mind. So we engage in these different states of mind. So I think it's reasonable to say that all of these states, anger, jealousy, competitiveness, arrogance, resentment, you know, that these are all based on the wish to be happy. You know, I think, you know, it's in a way it's sort of not like some external disease has come into me and made me angry. I have made myself angry because I think there's some real advantage in anger. I think there's some real advantage in jealousy, or I think there's some real advantage in pride, you know, an inflated pride where, you know, I'm so good, you know, like that, you know, I'm so good, I'm happy, you know, that sort of really inflated view of yourself. And it's sort of, we do it because we think this is a path to happiness. And we may even think that patience or, you know, like from the Buddhist thought transformation point of view of letting someone else have the victory, letting somebody else have their moment in the sun at your expense, you know, letting somebody else maybe even treat you badly, insult you, and you just accept it. That letting somebody else have the victory, we think there's no way that can be a path to happiness or a path to developing yourself. You know, but internally, that can be a source of great happiness. Taking a low position, giving, just the practice of giving, all these sort of things that superficially, if we judge from a sensory or a materialistic point of view, we think, that that's some form of loss. We may come to see that the practice of giving is actually that's a loser's thing. That's not for winners, that's for losers. And that is, so this is where if we judge things from the physical world, the sensory world, then we will make those judgments. We will make the judgments that generosity is bad, and miserliness, holding everything to yourself, is good. From a physicality point of view, billions of dollars in the bank, that's good, that's happiness, that's the thought. And you can see that this is the difference between the materially driven sensory sort of approach to life and an internal approach to life. So the internal approach to life recognises that the practice of giving in itself is a happiness. That the practice of patience in itself is a happiness. That the development of jealousy in itself, its own nature, the very nature of jealousy in itself, is suffering. The very nature of anger in itself, the actual experience of anger, completely irrespective of the rights or the righteousness of that anger, or the justification, the logic, whatever else that you might apply, no matter what about the logic, to come to see that the mere experience of anger in its own nature is suffering for you. And that's a really important point to come to. And that the very experience of loving kindness towards somebody else, in its very nature, in itself, in its own experience, is a happy, joyful experience for you. So, and this approach, I think, is quite simple, but we have to be convinced that there is no point in saying anger is destructive, and you might, like we're talking about affirmations, and just going through the sort of slogans, Monday is Patience Day, Tuesday is Loving Day, Wednesday is Kindness Day, Thursday is Generosity Day, or something. If we have this sort of thing, and we, mark it on the calendar. Today is World Prayer Day, I believe. Making prayers today, I believe. So, it's only of value if we have actually established it within our own mind as something that is true. So the real idea of closing the gap, the reason that there's a gap is that we ascribe or subscribe to some ethical view, world peace, kindness, love and compassion, patience, harmony in the society, dignity, respecting others, all these sort of things that we subscribe to. But, our own mind and our own behaviour betrays that aspiration. And so this is where there's a gap. That how do we stop that betrayal? Our own behaviour being a betrayal of our aspirational beliefs. And so my feeling is that the reason that my behaviour betrays my aspirational beliefs is because I have not yet convinced myself that anger is destructive. I have not yet convinced myself that arrogance and miserliness and hatred are destructive. And I've not yet fully convinced myself that loving kindness, love and compassion, patience, tolerance, showing others dignity and respect, that these are really, really worthwhile states of mind to possess. And the evidence that I haven't convinced myself of that is the fact that there is a gap between my actual behaviour and my thinking and the aspirational ethics system that I praise as being so wonderful. And so that we all have some sort of gap there, and how do we close that gap? And I think the real secret to closing that gap is to firmly establish in your mind that, for instance, anger is destructive, always destructive. Miserliness, grasping, clutching your possessions, thinking that this is the cause of happiness, that's faulty thinking, that there's no substantiation of that thought. Recognising that resentment, competitiveness, arrogance, inflated pride, jealousy, all these things are unhappy states. They're absolutely unhappy experiences for me, and all they give to the world is just unhappiness. All these states of mind, what they give to others is just unhappiness. Whereas kindness, love and compassion, patience, respect for others, generosity, non-harming, the whole world of non-harming of others, this gives me happiness, and it gives others happiness as well. So the reason there's a gap is because I'm not convinced of that. My actual thinking, my actual behaviour shows that I am not convinced that that is true. And so to try to work on convincing yourself that these things are true. So we'll do some meditation. So adopt a comfortable position, whether you're in a chair or on the floor. And so one of the factors that's very important in this process is cultivating mindfulness and alertness, these two sort of mental factors that work together, that effectively give us awareness and a discrimination of what's going on in our mind. So we have an awareness and then an intelligence that understands what's going on in my thinking at any time. And so we will focus on a single object. So we're going to focus our mind on one thing for a couple of minutes. And because we are focusing on one thing, everything else is turned off. Everything else is turned off. And so maybe for the first time in our life, we're actually giving ourselves a break from the relentless distraction and the relentless negativity and negative habituation that can be going on in our mind. So we will focus on the breath, just the breath coming in and going out. And because we're focusing on one thing, everything else is subdued or turned off. And it's because of that we get some benefit. And then by repeating the meditations, we can gradually develop the qualities of mindfulness and alertness that will then enhance our normal life experience. We can become more aware of what's going on in our own mind. So let's focus on the breath. So bring your mind within yourself and turn your turn your attention, first of all, let every thought go from your mind, and then turn your attention onto the breath. So in particular to like the awareness of the breath, the mental awareness of the breath. Going in and going out, coming in. You know, just that general feeling of the breath coming in, going out. And 100% focus on that for the next few minutes. Just relax a little bit and check your mind, check what happened in your meditation. So freely admit to yourself if you were sleepy or distracted or daydreaming, whatever was going on. You know, look at your meditation, how you kept the focus on the breath. And let's sort of strengthen our motivation. So say to ourselves, you know, this is important. I need to get control over my mind. I need to be able to direct my mind to where I want it to go. And so really thinking about the importance of this, having this ability. So we'll just do another minute or two. Again, the same process. Focus on the breath. Just repeat the same process, just for another very short while. And then bring your attention back to the room, but keep your mind fairly subdued. So, like we did last week, we will do a little analytical meditation. And so the same as last week, we'll just spend a couple of minutes using our own intelligence and life experience to examine this question: has anger deceived me? Has anger deceived me? You know, is it true that I've engaged in anger for the sake of being happy, of trying to be happy and trying to be free from suffering? But my engagement in anger has not delivered that. Instead, that it has only delivered suffering and misery. So the purpose of an analytical meditation is to, using all of your intelligence and knowledge, to examine this question or this point and trying to establish it in your own mind as something that is either true or false, depending on your analysis. So let's investigate this point. Does or has anger deceived me? It appears to be a cause of happiness, but it only brings misery and suffering. So let's check whether that's true or not true. And then return your concentration to the room. So in analytical meditations, it's good to use actual incidents or memories within your life, in your own life. So not making some distant analysis, but making a very personal analysis based on your own life experience or your own incidents from your own life. Use that life experience to analyse these things. So we've got some time now for discussion or questions or whatever you would like. So, yeah.
I'm confused about how you say anger can appear to be a cause of happiness. I've reflected and thought about the times when I've got angry, and it's never caused me happiness. It's probably used more because I'm venting, not because I'm deluding myself that that's making me happy.
So the question is about my statements that anger appears to us as a cause of happiness. And then here the point is put forward that it's always unpleasant or experience. So why then do you engage in it? Venting. So what is venting?
Just getting the tension out.
You're relieving some suffering, are you?
But then I'm not happy with it, and I just feel a bit...
Yeah, well, see, I'd say that you're backing up my point of view here. That the use of the word venting. I mean, this is where you need to examine your own thinking and words that you're using, and that's why it's good to talk to yourself. That's why analytical meditation is like a discussion with yourself. So in that analytical meditation, you say, no. That's not true that anger is, I see anger as happy. It's venting. And by venting, you mean you think that it's relieving suffering. Yeah. And that's why it's good to have these discussions with yourself and then check, what is it that I'm actually saying here? Actually do your own checking on what you're saying to you, the justification or the explanation of your own experience. So let's say we use it's venting, it's releasing, it's freeing me of this aggravation. Okay. It appears attractive to you if that's what you think is happening. And so that's the analysis you need to check. So we have this appearance or this belief that anger is releasing, freeing, venting, but what is the actual experience of anger within that process? And like you say, it's always destructive. to yourself. Sorry? Certainly not a happy experience, no. So that's why analytical meditation is that process of that internal discussion. But you've got to be on guard that you're not deceiving yourself within that analysis. So, yeah.
How would you deal with someone who's been angry towards you?
So the question is, how would you deal with somebody who's been angry towards you? Are they justified?
Yes.
Yes.
I guess if you believe you were doing the right thing, maybe you were doing something out of good, but then you weren't, and they're angry towards you for that. You saw that you were helping, but you obviously weren't.
Yeah, look, it's very difficult for us to control or influence what somebody else is thinking, how they're thinking. But we do have the ability to diffuse somebody else's anger. Well, we can do that. We can apologise, we can show patience, we can try to divert their thinking from whatever it is that is the problem, the area that they're... So if you understand your own anger, if you really understand your own anger, then it becomes easier and easier to assist somebody else to overcome their anger. And so, when you're angry, there is an object or a circumstance, some sort of encapsulation, right? And your mind is focusing on that circumstance, or that person or that object. Your mind is locked into that object. That object is an unappealing, unattractive, disturbing object or circumstance. And so your mind is locked into that, and so your mind is disturbed, is angry, is aggravated. So the object, there's this relationship between the object that is held by your mind and the mind that holds the object. So I think not this month, but my previous month, earlier in the year, I talked about this relationship between the object which is held by your mind and the mind that holds the object. They're a pair. And it can be hard to say which one has come first, whether the anger comes first and then modifies the appearance of the object into something very distasteful, or whether the distasteful object comes first and then the mind grabs onto that object and then develops anger. But in either case, we have this circumstance of a pair that are locked together, the distasteful object and the mind of anger that is obsessed or is locked onto that object, right? So if you understand your own anger, then you can see that, okay, I've got this pair that are locked together. Okay, I can change the object. I can focus on the carpet. And if my mind focuses on the carpet, I am no longer locked into this distasteful object. And so my state of mind is now affected by the fact that I am focusing on the breath or I'm focusing on the carpet. Okay? And so you break this pairing. And so then if I can hold my focus on the breath, for instance, just the mere neutral breath, then the mind of anger becomes unsustainable because the object no longer sustains that state of mind, and so the anger will dissipate. Similarly, if I have the mind of anger and the object held, the distasteful object, and then the mind of anger holding it like this, if I can look at the state of mind I've got and I try to apply the state of mind of patience or the state of mind of love, then I'm changing my mind. And you'll find that when you start changing your mind, the appearance of the object also changes. And so by changing your mind, the appearance of the distasteful object also disappears. And so if it's, let's say it's your partner, you know, the mind of anger and your partner, you could say to some degree that your partner does not change between the morning and the afternoon, but in the morning you have a nice, loving, affectionate attitude, and then in the afternoon, due to whatever circumstances, you think that they're totally distasteful and annoying and aggravating, and the mind that holds that is the mind of anger and aggravation. So we have to break this pairing of the distasteful object and the distasting mind. So we can do that by changing the mind or changing the object, and effectively end up changing both. Right? This is a very important sort of process to understand. And if you understand that for yourself, then when somebody is angry at you, you can similarly help them to break that pairing by distracting them, by, for instance, apologising. Here, have a cup of tea, sit down, let me massage your feet, whatever, you know, have a nice, I'll make a nice dinner for you, you know, relax, here's a hot water bottle, you know, whatever you think is appropriate. And so what you're doing is you're changing the object that they are holding. Get a divorce and run away. Okay, so you see, this is the process. You know, so if you really understand that process, it gives you the ability to maybe do something. You know, and the thing that you might have to do is leave the room or do something to let the object be dissipated. But if you really understand this pairing of the distasting mind and the distasteful object, and see that the process of overcoming that is change the object or change the mind or change the pairing, then if you see that within yourself, then you can help others to do something similar. Any other? Yeah.
I was just thinking about what you were saying earlier about closing the gap and our views that we subscribe to and the ethics and the path that we embrace, and that gap that can be there between our behaviour and that. And then you propose that the reason for the gap is that we don't truly believe in
that aspirational model, yeah.
Yeah. We don't actually believe in it strongly enough, and that's why there is that gap. But is it also possible that although we might strongly hold that aspirational model, we're deeply habituated to different behaviour, and there's that potential for that gap to be one of habituation?
Yeah, so the question is about, you know, we hold this aspirational, let's say, ethical behavioural model, you know, the affirmation or the inspiration of the Buddha or of Jesus or of some model of ethics and of behaviour. And then, so I've been saying that the reason that we have this gap is because in our own behaviour we are not convinced about really embracing that model. Let's say that's what I've been saying. So Ingrid is sort of offering this idea that the reason that we are not bridging the gap is because of our habituation to behaviours that are not maybe consistent with that ethical model. So I would say that that's exactly the same thing. That the reason that we are habituated to maybe anger or miserliness or self-cherishing or whatever else, that habituation is that, you know, we have convinced ourselves that self-interest or self-cherishing is the pathway to real happiness. And we've somehow, the habituations that we have, our habituations to anger, our habituations to jealousy or to pride, they are because we have habitually convinced ourselves that anger, pride, arrogance, superiority, jealousy, etc. are beneficial to my happiness. So I'd say that it's exactly the same point in a way, that our negative habituations are just evidence that we've convinced ourselves of the opposite stance. And our positive habituations are evidence that we have convinced ourselves of the positive, the closeness to our ethical model. So it's different language for the same problem, it'd be what I would say.
Yeah, although I'm wondering whether the habituation could be older than the
Yeah. Yeah, and the Buddhist viewpoint is that we are deeply, deeply habituated to the negative, unfortunately. Okay, so let's then, maybe we just finish with a little meditation. So, look, it's really valuable. You know, something very special, all of us coming together. And, we have a freedom. We have a freedom to come and be here, to think and meditate and discuss together. An extraordinary freedom that is also very rare. And so, it's something to be treasured and to view as very precious. Reason I say that is that a friend of mine and a friend of many people here, who's one of the founding members of the Buddhist Centre down in Geelong, she just last few weeks found she was very sick, and then she, had a thing on Friday, collapsed and went and thing, and today they turned off her life support system. So for us, we should really think to appreciate the opportunity and the freedom that we have to come together and to discuss and to meditate together, that it is something to be treasured. And then the effort of us all meditating together is again something very precious and worthwhile. And so we think that takes the form of a ball of white light in the middle of the room, and then bring it above yourself and let it pour down through the crown of your head and completely fill your body with light. No longer a sort of a hard physical body, but composed of light. And your mind completely clear and open, without any disturbance whatsoever, completely free of any disturbance. And so imagine this white light has come, the benefit of everybody coming together, that's poured down into you and completely filled your body and your mind in this way. And then everyone else here in the room, that they want happiness and they want to be free from suffering, but unfortunately they lack happiness and they experience suffering. And so imagine you send out the merit or the virtue of tonight collects in a white, like a big white egg at your heart. So that all of that energy or virtue collects in the form of a big white egg at your heart. And then imagine rays of light go out from that to everybody else here in the room, and bring them into a state of happiness and free from suffering, both mental and physical. And to your family and your friends, even your enemies, everybody is in exactly the same situation. And then the whole field of living beings, imagine in front of you every living being in the form of a human facing towards you, and thinking that every single one of these people want happiness and want to be free from suffering. But in fact, they lack happiness and they have suffering. And so we can think also that they lack the opportunity for understanding, that many people, they lack the opportunity to understand their situation, or the opportunity has passed. And so we can also send out rays of light where we are giving them happiness and we're giving them the freedom from suffering, but we're also sending them this opportunity, this effort that we've all made tonight. We send that and give to everybody this opportunity to develop their understanding. Then imagine the rays of light return and dissolve back into your heart. And generate a great sense of joy or delight at being able to visualize this. Okay, so I'll be back next week and I'll try to progress the topic along a little bit further. And just to mention that on the Sunday, I think it's the 28th, Sunday the 28th, I'm doing a one-day course here on a topic called Make the Switch. So make the switch. And there's some posters and stuff about it in the corridor, so you're all most welcome to come to that if you're able. But otherwise, I will hopefully see you all next week. So thank you.